Two drunk assholes talking about whatever comes to mind. We present Filler with Jack Flake and Rob Harper. Episode 1: The Dark Crystal vs. Buckaroo Banzai. Filler is Jack and my insane rambling. In this episode, we've watched our favorite childhood movies, The Dark Crystal and Buckaroo Banzai. We then go on to discuss them and how much they mean to us. Please do note that we are extremely drunk during these recordings, so if we do sound like unintelligent fools, just forgive us.
I was going to send you one of the websites to go to. They had a tattoo of all the Labyrinth goblins. Someone had a tattoo on their leg of all the different goblins from Labyrinth. Like the ones with the horn, like all the different ones.
What's he saying?
Yeah. All those ones all over the person's leg. I was going to send it to you. I'm like, who's Dark Crystal? I would have sent it to you.
Well, now that opened up the floodgates to what shaped us as children. You had Buckaroo Banzai, and that's why you're Perfect Robbie, and I had the Dark Crystal, and that's why I'm a
Gelfling.
I'm not a Gelfling. I think I'm a Skeksis, perhaps.
Yeah, you're one of the Skeksis after they turn into. You're one of the ones that are the super beings at the end. They look like trees. It was actually... The only problem I had with that, I don't like how the Gelflings work. Everything else worked for me except for the Gelflings.
Which I thought as a kid was the strong point, was because everyone told him he's the he's the chosen one. He's this. He thinks he's hot
No,
shit.
not the character. I mean, what they actually look like.
I
love the point that he is a wimp and she's the hero. I love that.
He was built up.
I just don't like what they actually look like. The puppets for them didn't work for me. The Skeksis look awesome. Every other puppet looked awesome. Just them. The way I think they tried to be too...
Looks like Tyler Swift or perhaps Carrie Underwood. No, what's her name from Attack of the Show?
Carrie Underwood?
Oh, yeah. Okay, I guess so.
Hot Playboy model? Carrie Underwood?
Yeah, she looks like...
Sarah Underwood.
Sarah Underwood. She looks like a Gelfling, perhaps Taylor Swift.
No, it's... What, you mean they're super skinny and...
They look like Gelflings.
It's not that. It's the actual animation of the way they animate. They're a little too puppet.
No, yeah, because when they do the long shots and they're running down the waterfalls and stuff...
At some points it's live action. Do you notice that? When he was getting over the observatory thing? And he's climbing out? That's actually a person, obviously.
In a suit made to look like the puppet.
Yeah.
Made to look like a person. Yeah.
Yeah. Because there's I'm like, what? That's a person because they're doing... But it's just some of the points where everything else worked for me for that movie except for the Gelfling's puppetry.
Yeah.
It's a great story. Like, the story's pretty cool. And dark. For a kid's movie, very dark.
Shit-tastically dark. Oh
like,
my God.
I never realized that it's that dark. Because I knew Mark, you remember Mark, my sister's ex-husband? His nieces, they were little kids and they were watching that movie. I'm like, fuck, those little girls were watching this movie when they were like 6.
I got shown it in school when I was probably that age.
That's crazy.
And I was like...
I don't know why I never... Yeah, I don't know why I never watched it. It was just one of those things I missed.
When they're draining the podlings.
Or her being tortured is even worse because you care about the character. She gets tortured.
The podlings, you're like, okay, they're
Whatever,
kind of gypsy types, and you're like,
whatever.
Get them on the
Well, it's still bad, but like when she's getting tortured, that's like, wow, that's Scar's children.
They built up this whole rapport with her.
She's like a great character, and all of a sudden she's getting tortured, and like, ah. And just the Skeksis are scary.
Yeah, they are scary. They were frightening as a child.
Yeah,
They're
frightening now.
When they started tearing apart the Chancellor, and I'm like, oh my God.
Yeah, when they're ripping off all his clothes, all his stuff.
When are they going to stop? Because they just pile in there, and then all of a sudden he's like, they do a scene. There's just one cut scene
where he's just like naked and like huddled. He's almost like a rape victim.
Yeah, he's just like,
yeah, it was like a rape scene.
And I'm like, oh my God. I always thought Chancellor wasn't a bad guy per se. I think he was like the black.
I don't know. Was he a bad guy? It's hard to say because he was doing it for his own means. Though, really.
He's the first in my lifetime. The first
anti-hero.
Anti-hero or not amoral kind of.
He is amoral, really though.
Ambiguous.
He doesn't. You don't really know why. Obviously, he's been kicked out, and he's pissed about that. If he'd still been in the group, he would have been bad. But when he left the group, he worked against the group.
At some point, was he just like, "Hey, this is what you brought upon yourselves"?
Chaos, really.
Yeah, I know that if this this Gelfling gets to this point,
it'll fuck over the guys that hurt me.
this and I want to see what happens.
Yeah.
So
He's an agent of chaos.
he's not
He's
bad
working
guy,
against the bad guys, but he's not a good guy.
but he's not. And that was always my first like. There's a
That's
fucking
true.
gray area.
That's right.
I'm a person who hates gray areas, but I was like, if there's got to be a gray area, I'm gonna.
He's not. Yeah. Well, it's hard to even say he's a gray area because he's definitely doing it for a reason. He got fucked over, so he's going against the guys who fucked him over.
It's
That's
either
it.
for revenge,
Yeah, it's a revenge. Yeah. That's all it is.
or to see what happens, or to see.
Like in another story, he could have been the hero for sure. Because, he got kicked out and he's coming back for revenge. That's a lot of stories that are like that.
And he's getting revenge against the bad guys, so is it just...
He's an anti-hero that way.
He is, and that was my first
He's not
introduction.
a good guy, but he's going against the bad guys, so he's a good guy.
Yeah, it was my first introduction to that
For sure.
gray area.
Final Fantasy VII, which is, after watching Dark Crystal, I'm like, fuck, there's a lot of things in Final Fantasy VII with that was very Final Fantasy VII.
Now, I'm using my hands, and I'm just doing this.
Yeah.
For the audience at home, I'm just swirling my hands.
Yeah,
and you were like,
telescope.
yeah, that's right. He
It
was
was so much like I was like, oh my god, that's directly taken from
the mechanical solar system of their universe was represented in
it. With the actual telescope in the middle of it, I was like, that's directly taken. And it was up on a hill, remember that in Final Fantasy VII with the guy on the wolf guy, whatever he was? I don't know if he was lion, wolf thing. That was where he lived. That was totally taken from that. I never knew that until watching it. I was like, oh my god, that's it. Yeah, it's funny.
It was funny that when Algra had her eye out, and you're like, yeah, that explains a lot. Yeah, that's, for you, that explains a lot.
She took her eye out and was using it as a,
periscope.
She threw it,
Yeah, she was using a periscope.
It was on the table and she was looking around.
Look at you! What are you doing up there? Oh my god.
Well, that whole movie, that screams Jack to me. Henson was a little crazy. He's got a comic book that just got released that was a movie draft that never got made. It's called Tale of Sand, it's called. And I guess it's really fucked up, too. I guess Henson was a really fucked up kind of dude. But
he had a huge imagination, and it all can't be...
Well, I think he had more of a... Yeah.
The years of doing children's programming, at some point, the pendulum has to swing the other way.
I think naturally, he was... Because this Tale of Sand was before he was that. He wrote this before he was doing those puppets. Yeah? So I think it was he naturally liked the stuff, but then he just got into doing the puppets. And then he tried to do cooler stuff with the puppets, obviously with Labyrinth and Dark Crystal. But, you're doing puppets, how much can you do with it, right?
In the mid-80s.
Yeah. It's not, even now you can even do it. And I love how, when you watch Dark Crystal, like, Fraggles are so much, obviously it would have fit in there. It's so much the same, right?
Yes. It's the same world.
Yeah.
You could take Labyrinth, you could take Dark Crystal.
Yeah, they're all the same. Labyrinth takes place either really before or really after the Dark Crystal, but it's the same world.
Or you just go, oh, it's continent over.
It takes. But even so, it almost seems like it's. I find Labyrinth is almost like the mythology of the Dark Crystal world. Like it's like, oh, there's a Goblin King who controlled the goblins before, and meanwhile later all those goblins became those little guys that were getting tortured. Almost like it's
the podlings.
They that's what the goblins became. Yeah. Because they were very similar looking.
Yes.
Take off their armor and all their crazy shit. They look like those little guys, It's definitely that's the thing with.
But then you don't feel sorry for them when they get getting drained. If they were the goblins that were torturing.
Why?
People.
The goblins were awesome. Hello, in the Labyrinth, I rooted for the Goblin King the whole time. She was a bitch. She deserved everything she got. That kid would have been a prince among men, among goblins. If he had been raised by the Goblin King, because at first he was going to fuck him up and just turn into a goblin, but he fell in love with the little kid.
Yeah, and he was going to become the next Goblin King.
Yeah, he was like, you're my prince, you're my... Yeah. That kid would have had a better life living as a Goblin King. She ruined it for him. And she could have been the Goblin King's queen.
No.
I'd like to write a fanfic where she gives in to the Goblin King.
And fanfic.
Her and the Goblin King live happily ever after and raise the kid as their own. And...
Imagine that, Jennifer Connelly.
Yeah, having sex with David Bowie, that's hot.
She's
super hot. Jennifer Connelly's super hot. She's still hot today.
It's the same world.
Oh yeah. Like, that's the thing, like, even, like, the Muppets aren't much different from them. Like, the Muppets and Sesame Street characters are just like a cartoon character away from them.
Those two are in the same world, obviously.
Oh yeah, they're for sure. They share characters.
That is like us watching TV here and going, oh, well, it's set in this world, but, they give it a little tweak. They got it.
Well, it's like the difference between us watching Batman animated series, kind of, where it's just the little caricatures.
Yeah. They've got reality tweaked up to 11. We're,
I think the, what's it called, world is the real world. The Dark Crystal world is the real world. And the Muppets is the TV show.
Yes. Because in the Dark Crystal world, it is much like our own world, where it is a terrible place to be. And also, the religions at the end, it turns out to be all bullshit. Both sides have their own religion that they both subscribe to. At the end, it turns out they're all the same. They're two halves of the one whole, but both of them had their own.
But don't you think what's the ancients or whatever they were called?
The mystics, yeah.
Yeah, they knew what was going on, don't you think? Or were they drawn unnaturally to that place?
At the beginning, they're like, oh, okay.
They're more hippies, but when they started doing a pilgrimage, I assume they knew what was going on.
They say that they were there to destroy them.
So you think they were just drawn there to be there, and then it turned out they were there. They were
Yeah.
drawn mystically because they were to be
And
wanted.
it turns out that the Skeksis weren't possibly going to...
I understood right from when the leader and the other one were dying at the same time. I was like, I'm sure as a kid I would never got it, but I was like, oh, they're the same thing.
You had... To understand the movie, you had to...
Then again, I'm
guess
also
that.
thinking in I don't think we think in the general of what everybody else would think. We kind of catch on quicker than the general.
No, I think that it was laid out there.
Do you think it was pretty obvious?
Throw out a few. Like, one gets his hand cut, the other one gets...
Yeah.
He basically...
When's that point? But I mean, right at the
He
beginning.
starts spoon-feeding it. Like, listen, this is the way it's
Well,
going to be.
and the moment one dies and the one disappears, then you're like, okay.
On a trek, and
Yeah.
all of a sudden...
You're like, okay. But I right off the bat, where I'm like, well, the leader of this is dying and the leader of that is dying. They're the same thing. Like,
Yeah, okay,
they're
so
connected intrinsically.
they give you a good probably 20-minute window of, like,
yeah.
you're either on the fast track, or I'm going to start spoon-feeding you. But
Oh yeah, it's like, and yeah, it's like any classic, like just like M. Night Shyamalan movies. He's excellent, especially the early movies. He knew how to do it so perfectly that the moment he wanted you to realize it, you realized it almost. Like, certain people would get it once earlier, but, like, I knew some people who, the Sixth Sense are like, oh, I knew he was dead the whole time. But it's like, most people, the moment he wants you to know that he's dead, you're like, oh, fuck, he's dead. And it's like, just a split second before they actually say it, so you think you're smarter than them.
Right.
Like,
Well,
he's excellent at that.
click, and you're like, oh my god, I got it. Hey, this is what's
Yeah.
fact.
And you're like,
Yeah!
yeah, I'm smarter than that. Yeah, he does it really well, really good that way, so that you feel smarter than the average bear. Yeah.
Where Buckaroo Banzai, I'm looking over you going,
I hope that screams Rob to you, because that is,
yeah, I
to me, that is, Buckaroo Banzai is the ultimate movie. Like, that's, people, like, they don't understand, you don't understand how much that movie means to me. Like, that
I think I
literally
do.
is my favorite movie.
I think I do, because I looked over and I was like, you know what, that...
I just had that, like, smirk on my face, like, childhood bliss.
Going back into the past and your actions and your everything, I'm like...
Everything's determined by that. For
Yeah.
sure. Even, like, even X-Men and things, it's like a group setting where there's a bunch of different characters, like,
If you could have a compound...
oh, that's my dream. To be Buckaroo Banzai is, like, not to do what he does necessarily, because I wouldn't want to be a brain surgeon, but just to have that group of, like, and the whole point of, like, Buckaroo, like, his fan club who were, like, help him out and shit, and, like,
And just go on adventures with these group of
Yeah.
core guys
Yeah.
who are like...
just, yeah, multiple characters who just hang around, and
They got
That
your back.
really
They're all
is,
on the,
yeah.
like almost a family of people
Yeah.
who...
that is literally my perfect
And
setup.
they live in the same
Yeah, like
mobile
literally
home. They
compound,
live in the
and yeah,
same
they travel around in
compound.
a mobile
They live
home,
in the
and they have a
same-
band. Like,
And just for shits and giggles, they're like, let's rock out some
yeah,
tunes.
that is totally. And you know who does that a lot? And I'm like, he's like the modern day Buckaroo Banzai is Robert Rodriguez, the director. He's got a band. He has a compound. He is Buckaroo Banzai. He makes movies instead of brain surgery, but pretty much. But yeah, it's like that is like for me that as a child that really influenced me. That and Star Wars obviously that influenced everyone. Star Wars is more universal, where Buckaroo Banzai. I don't know how. I don't know if it was just my parents just randomly grabbed that DVD. I don't know how I ended up watching
That DVD.
I mean, yeah, VHS
Yes.
at the
They
time.
went into the future
Yeah.
by about 20
Yeah.
years, picked up a DVD.
Definitely VHS. But I don't know why. I don't know who first picked that. I don't think I did, but it just randomly got picked. I don't know which of my parents. I never really asked them. I don't even know.
They probably wouldn't. It's probably a throwaway thing.
Yeah.
I don't have no idea.
But they do. I guarantee if you ask my mother, she'd like, yeah, he made us rent that because every week for the weekend we'd rent 2 movies, and if like not 2 movies, I'm sure it was more than 2, but 2 movies that I wanted to watch was Star Wars, because at the time it was only Star Wars. There was no others at the time, and Buckaroo Banzai. That was it.
And so your sister would get one, you would
Yeah,
get one.
I remember they had like Duran Duran videos and things like like they were more into music and that kind of shit. Like they weren't into movies at all. And I remember them renting Apocalypse Now once with I wasn't allowed to watch it, but everybody else watched it. That kind of shit. But like, yeah, generally it was just they'd rent random movies, and it was always Star Wars and Buckaroo Banzai. Literally, I watched that movie every weekend for probably 5 years, like for as long as they did that. So when I was a kid. What year did it come out? 1984, something like that. So I was like 9 until now. I still watch it every once in a while. It's on Netflix, so I watch it all the time. And the DVD. But yeah,
And I'd heard of it. Don't get me wrong.
yeah, it's one of those movies. It's like a cult movie where not many people watch
But
it.
I hadn't seen it.
Yeah. And it's just a great movie. And a lot of amazing characters in it, like Clancy Brown and Peter Weller and Jeff Goldblum. Like, it's amazing the people who are in the movie.
The actors, the characters are good, but the actors that they
it's like
pulled
a
in.
huge crazy actors. And what's his name? Like, yeah, John Warford. I love that.
John Lithgow.
Yeah, he's amazing in it. Like, he pretty much steals the show, really. But they're all good. They're all characters. That's the thing, it's characters, right?
Yes.
That influenced me too a lot. There's caricatures. Characters.
They're not real people. Not
No,
one of them.
None of them are real people. Yeah.
You look and go, that's a real person.
That's yeah.
He's feeling this, he's feeling that. It's like,
And the names, like, they all have wacky names. Like, there's random, like, Buckaroo Banzai, New Jersey, and, like, Ringo, and, like...
Rawhide.
Perfect Tommy, like all these names, like Pretty Penny, like her name's Pretty Penny, like Penny Pretty is her name. That's her, and her twin sister's name is Peggy Pretty. Like, like come on. Yeah, that's definitely influenced me a lot for sure. Just the characters and adventures,
Yeah.
and like the car too, like just having a cool tricked out car. But they don't even use that much.
No.
But it's just cool that it's tricked out car.
But at least as a window into each other's childhood souls. You
Yeah.
can see where...
Oh yeah, yours is much more surreal. Like it's much more like on a different level. Mine's much more like just comic book cartoony.
Very much
Yeah.
like this is...
Where yours is much more surreal and dark and like crazy, like coming from weird angles.
And I'm a fan
But still an adventure. It's still an adventure story.
when you boil them both down, it's the same story, basically.
Really, yeah.
It is the same story. The
One hero has to stop the bad guys from doing something that they shouldn't do. Like that's what it is.
That's right. But one takes it...
And it's a group of bad guys, and the heroes have to go into that group of bad guys' place. Like, it is very similar stories.
It's titanically similar.
And there's a good type of bad guy, and, like, the Mystics are kind of like the black, the people from Planet 10, and then the red ones are like the Skeksis. It is very similar when you think about it.
It is. And it's just, one of them goes at it in a very...
Yeah, one's much more surreal and puppets. The other one's much more caricatures and comic.
Yes.
Yeah, it's funny, though. It's true, though.
It is.
Well, there you have it. Jack is scarred for life by the Dark Crystal, and I want to be in a band with my own compound. We're sorry. See you next time.
So, Rob,
Yes, Jack?
have you heard of something called Finland Old Time Radio?
No, I haven't.
Well, you should. And how would you be able to tell your friends and family about such an excellent radio program?
I have no idea.
By wearing swag. Swag that has the logo, has the name, prominently displayed, very, very nice looking apparel.
Where'd you get this swag?
Where would you find that swag?
Well, if I was setting up a website,
And you
it'd be
did?
Cafe Press because it's easy. So it'd be cafepress.com/Vinland Old Time Radio.
We could say slash, but I think you might enunciate a little bit better and give us that website one more time, champ.
cafepress.com/Vinland Old Time Radio.
Buy some of the apparel, the knickknacks, the accoutrement, if you will.
Patty wax.
Patty wax. I don't know what that means. But accoutrement is an appropriate use of that word. So
Knick-knack, paddywhack, give a dog a bone, Jack. We're the dogs, give us the bone.
Who let the dogs out? Oof, oof, oof. Okay, no.
Oh,
That's
not a good ad, no.
No.
cafepress.com/Vinland Old Time Radio.